Welcome to Captains of Industry. We look at the last month of highlights from previous episodes of the show. Welcome to Captains Rewind. Shameel, you took over September 2012, the 1st of September 2012, now almost 2.5 years, and your stress levels must be growing exponentially. You've got deflation on prices where voice and data are concerned, and your input costs are going through the roof. How are you coping?
Bronwyn, it has been tough. It's been a tough 2 years for the industry in totality. Obviously the whole mobile termination rate debacle didn't really help the situation. And I think when you take R1 billion off your bottom line, it causes let's just say a fair amount of stress. Look, it's a tough environment because we are going through a pricing transformation on top of the mobile termination rate decline and on top of a number of different issues, especially inflationary increases, a weaker rand and so on. So it is creating a fair amount of stress. What we're doing to cope with it, I think we're managing the situation quite well, and actually have landed up in a situation where we're at least maintaining or growing market share. And the big thing is that I think we're basically firstly managing the price transformation well, and our strategy has really been very simple. What we're doing is we're investing quite heavily in our network. So this
you haven't pulled back.
Correct. So the way we've actually coped with it is very different to how I think some other companies are coping with it. Most other industries will be pulling back. We're actually investing. So what we've done is invested more into our network. And combined with the acquisition of National, we've spent close to 10 billion this year in South Africa, and then next year we're planning to spend almost 17 billion in South Africa again, basically with the acquisition of Neotel, and again a massive capital investment of over 8 billion. So, and what we've done is we've used this to create capacity in our network to bring down pricing, but also to really cope with what I call the data revolution, and making sure that we're ready to capture it, and we're seeing that success come through.
Let's talk now about the comments that you've made recently in the press, and that is that we're looking at potentially, or you're looking at potentially sharing costs, the input costs among different players in the mobile environment. I see that MTN SA CEO is definitely behind this strategy. Now, how do we make this work? And let's just use the example that you've both referred to openly in the papers, and that is the diesel generators, where you've got Vodacom equipment, MTN equipment, Cell C equipment. Why have 3 generators? Why not just share 1 diesel generator? So give me a little more insight into how you see this working out.
So I think what you're dealing with, Bronwyn, is really a situation where the industry is maturing. You've got inflationary pressures, you've got exchange rate pressures, and you're buying most of your equipment in foreign currency. Your rental escalations continue to grow, but your revenues are growing at single digits. So you've basically got to find ways to optimize your costs. And I think one of the opportunities that are there, which you're seeing worldwide now, is that there's more let's say, the operators have come to the point where they realize that, look, we have to compete, but there's areas that we can actually share.
Why duplicate?
Why duplicate?
Costs.
Exactly. So as an example, is really the generator part, because we've just spent 80 million on the power crisis in making sure that we buy more generators, so that we upgrading all our batteries and so on and so on. But there's definitely ways that we can share some of that, especially if we're going to go into a situation where the power crisis ends up lasting for a lot longer.
Well, it doesn't look as though it's going to end anytime soon, considering we're hearing absolutely nothing from the Eskom war room.
No, and obviously that's a major concern for us. And I think one of the things that we could potentially be looking at as well is how much off-the-grid power can we generate between the different players. So there's an opportunity there that we as an industry have to start looking at. How do we deal with this crisis, and how can we manage this crisis in a more effective way? But also when it comes to building fiber, as an example. We already have what we call open access fiber networks. So although people talk about open access fiber networks, your dark fiber Africas do that. You know, they basically build fiber for us and then resell it to the other operators as well. So you are getting, and that's where a element of cost saving is coming.
Especially fiber in rural areas.
Correct. So when you start to, and a good example of where you can share is we built what we call the National Long Distance Network with MTN and Neotel. So we built a fiber from basically Joburg to Durban and Joburg to Cape Town. We're now busy speccing to basically connect Durban to Cape Town. Now, and obviously you pick up all the towns along the way. Now that in itself is not something that one operator can do individually. And it just makes a lot more economical sense if you build it together, because it's quite costly, because remember you're going through rivers and mountains and all kinds of things. So it's quite a costly exercise.
Is there a risk that the Competition Commission is going to look at this, the strategy to share input costs and say, hang on a minute, what does this do to the end consumer?
Well, I think what it does is, if you're in a pricing transformation mode and you're bringing prices down actively, as we're doing, and I mean prices are dropping every year 25-30%, if not more. So what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I'm bringing down the prices. You need to, which is invariably landing up with a decline in revenue. You're trying to offset it with data, but data is not yet big enough to offset it completely. You have to then look at the other lines.
The sustainability of
correct.
The telecommunications industry.
100%, and you've got to say, look, where do we optimize further? And some of it is optimizing wastage in your distribution costs, as an example.
Brian, let's talk about Transnet becoming an OEM, original equipment manufacturer, on the back of the recent locomotive success story. Share it with me.
Yes, the idea is that eventually we'll be able to manufacture and have intellectual property rights for our own locomotive, the Trans-Africa locomotive. And these acquisitions are helping us to understand the engineering of locomotives. We already have established a research and development unit within Transnet Engineering that is working on the preliminary drawings and designs of a locomotive.
Talk to me about this 95 tranche, or the 95 locomotives, electric locomotives. Of them, 10 were brought in from China, 85 manufactured on the ground. Am I correct in saying that?
Indeed, yes. 85 of them were assembled at Transnet Engineering in South Africa. Only 10 were totally manufactured in China. So we used local labor, we used local contractors to supply certain parts of the locomotive and so on. So this was very exciting for us.
We've spoken a lot on news platforms recently about the inability of South Africa to attract foreign direct investment. You, however, sir, seem to be getting it right. International finance institutions and the like are throwing money at your projects. What are you doing right?
Well, a couple of years ago, I mean, Transnet has had a reputation over the years. Even before I arrived, it had a good credit standing. And we announced the market demand strategy, and we've stuck to it. We said we would spend 300 billion revitalizing equipment, that we would generate revenue to pay for the 300 billion, and that we'll only borrow 100 billion. And we're still on track with that program. Our financial ratios, our balance sheet has not been compromised. In fact, it has been growing from strength to strength in the last 5 years. So investors are quite happy with that, happy to buy Transnet bonds.
A lot of support coming from Canada and the US. Is that post very successful road shows into those territories?
You'll remember that when we bought the 1,000 locomotives, well, we are still buying them. When we announced the tender was awarded to the Chinese company, China South Rail, China North Rail, and
General Electric and Bombardier.
So in Canada and in the United States, they have the exports agencies, export support agencies that are able to give guarantees for exports coming out of Canada or the United States. In the United States, it's called US EXIM, and in Canada, it's Canada EXIM. So what we did is we applied for the guarantees for the locomotives that we were going to be buying from Bombardier and from the US. And this was granted, despite the fact that we will manufacture the locomotives in South Africa. They were regarded as exports out of Canada and the United States because we bought from American and Canadian companies. So we were able to get guarantees of about 13 billion rand, and we're able to conclude loans on the back of those guarantees.
Are you confident of future support from the global bond environment?
Of course. We have quite a few sources that are available to us to fund the program. As we have said before, the Global Medium-Term Note Program, which is international bond issues. In fact, last year we were, or in the last financial year, we issued an international bond denominated in rand for about 5 billion rand, which was quite a bold move, and it was taken up by European and American investors. There is appetite for Transnet's dollar-denominated bonds. The domestic market is always deep and liquid, and we issue there every fortnight. We have facilities with the African Development Bank, and now the Chinese are also saying they can come to the party to the extent that we're buying in China.
How can we take Transnet's success and extrapolate that to other state-owned entities in the country?
I think the other state-owned entities are perhaps not doing that badly. They just have different challenges to ours. And some, I mean,
Brian, you know you're on television and you're going to be quoted as saying the other state-owned enterprises are not doing as badly. You happy? You don't want to refocus that statement?
Let me rephrase the statement. I don't think the other state entities are doing very badly.
I see the addition of very badly. I'll give you that.
They're not doing badly at all because they just have different challenges to the ones that we have, and they are trying their best to handle the challenges that they have.
Have they come and asked you for some advice on those challenges?
Well, we have forums. For example, the state-owned entities that are under the Department of Public Enterprises. We meet, we have chairpersons and CEOs forum that meets with the minister periodically. So we share information and advice there.
We're having a tough time in the media industry right now, and I had some time to obviously research ahead of this interview, Mike, and I think it's fair to say that you're probably having a tougher time in the construction industry, and it has been tough for some time. How are you feeling at the moment?
Bronwyn, yes, it is tough. I think I'm feeling reasonably relaxed because, you know, WBHO is a very strong company in terms of its staff and the people that run it. That we've been through tough times before, and we've got a very good tried and tested team that I wouldn't want to go into these times without. And hopefully, one of the big reasons for the downturn is the lack of government spending, and obviously the drop-off in the resource prices and the work in Africa that we thought was coming through, the work in Australia that has dropped off on the resource side.
Well, let's pause there and tackle each of these elements in sort of order of magnitude, and let's talk about the government spending, that 800 billion rand that hasn't come to fruition. And you'll have seen the comments recently by Neville Nicolau, the relatively new CEO of Basil Reed, saying, making very strong statements, and in fact saying that there's an immature relationship between government and business. And this is why we aren't seeing that 800 billion rand coming to fruition from an expenditure perspective. Do you agree with his statements?
I don't think there is. I think that this is a fantastic industry. I really do think that under all the noise, government appreciate what a good industry this is. You know, I think if you look just back on the infrastructure that's been delivered over the years, it's been delivered at below world-class prices and delivered on time to the right quality, whether you're talking about airports or roads or stadiums or whatever it is. So we have a wonderful industry, great universities, great consulting engineers, great contractors, and they've all worked fantastically well together for the past 40 years in putting South Africa where it is. And I think that, I really do hope that will continue. We certainly have had our problems and with the competition issues, which has caused government to be quite rightly disappointed with us and a lack of trust. But certainly there's no lack of trust from our side, and we have engaged with the members of the PICC and the ministers on a fairly regular basis, really trying to unravel and trying to get the industry on the right course. As far as government is concerned, the right course is to make it more inclusive. In other words, just not dominated by the 4 or 5 companies that have been around for a long time. And I think all of us are working very hard on that inclusivity. In fact, just the other day, one of the companies we've been mentoring, a black woman-owned company, was awarded its grade 9 certificate, which is the highest certificate you can get on the CIDB. Another woman-owned company earlier this year was also got to grade 9. So those are big step forwards in making the industry more inclusive. So we really are committed to that, and we just hope that we can actually really get onto a sincere, genuine relationship with government.
It must be tough. It must be tough when you see the news headlines coming to fruition, and here if you refer to the civil claim from the city of Cape Town, where there's alleged collusion involving WBHO on the tender for Greenpoint Stadium. You know, that's a civil claim of almost R500 million. What is your stance on that front? It doesn't appear to be going away, these collusion allegations.
We don't know whether it'll ever go away. I suppose it'll be tested in court eventually. But we have always said, you know, for the last 3 or 4 years, we've just said that we did not inflate that price. We did not allocate the stadiums. We did not agree a price beforehand. And unfortunately, that has been so... It's been put in the press so often, almost the perception that occurred has now almost become reality, but it's not reality. So we believe we'll defend our case there, and that's why we haven't provided for it.
You bring up an interesting point. How do you feel about the press? How did you feel ahead of my interview? Do you see us as the bad guys? Are we making life difficult for you?
Look, I suppose the press always want to have a more sensationalist aspect to their... for their readers, to make sure that their readers... So I've sort of learnt that, and so we are a little bit skeptical about what we read, because sometimes the truth and the realities are a bit more boring than, you know, all these sensational or fairly sensational articles that appear. So Bronwyn, we've had to live with that, and, you know, I think, as you know, WBHO always like to keep a fairly low profile anyway. So, and really we work hard here. We really haven't got time for you know, all this sort of conjecturing and whatever. So, yeah, the press is what it is, you know, and you've got guys have got to get your job done. So I think we understand that.
Herman, you are one of the biggest and brightest entrepreneurs out of South Africa, and you spend a lot of your time traveling the world speaking about entrepreneurship. Where do you think we can help South African entrepreneurs?
One thing that we're missing, and missing fundamentally as a country, is our policies dividing us as a nation around racial backgrounds. I think it's really very unfortunate. This whole policies are really unfortunately not doing favor to this country. So I think what we need to do is to really start adopting policies that can embrace all of us as South Africans. Because in that process of embracing all of us as South Africans, you will see the economic development of this country will be one of the best performing countries in the world, and the government will be able to really collect more taxes, which we can then use in educating our people, because we really need to, for us as a country to effect real transformation. Real transformation can only happen once we can recognize the need for us to empower people, giving them the best education ever.
You feel very strongly that we are going down the wrong path with our current labour legislation. You feel so strongly, in fact, that you've actually taken the government to court. Where are you in the battle, and what in your mind is wrong with labour legislation?
The one mistake that we really made in our news to democracy, we tended to obviously really want to really treat the business as if business is an enemy of the people, and come out with some of the draconian labor legislations, Section 32 of the Labor Relations Act, that literally prevents small businesses from really exploiting their talents and really busy destroying them. And at the same time, what happens, so we end up with one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. I think this Section 32 really I find it actually quite difficult to understand why the Minister of Labour in this country supports such a draconian labour legislation that prevents 8.5 million South Africans from really getting an opportunity to decide for themselves what type of work they've got to really do. So it's really very unfortunate. And
elaborate on Section 32.
So what happens with this piece of legislation, it allows the big labour unions and big business to get together on a regular basis, agree on conditions of employment for their particular sector. Once these agreements are signed, these are private parties. The law then forces the Minister of Labour to extend these agreements to other parties involved in that particular sector. And who are the biggest casualties? Small businesses and unemployed South Africans. So I cannot see how a minister of a country in a country of such high unemployment can allow private agreements to be extended to other people who are not party to those agreements. These agreements obviously they suit big business, because then they destroy small businesses who should really be competing with big business. And secondly, it suits big labor unions because they can negotiate the best deals for their members. But then the Minister of Labour misses a very fundamental point for her to really understand that she has the responsibility to the unemployed South Africans. Her responsibility is to really create that environment that really promotes job creation in the country and ensure that there's fairness in the
I want to put this into perspective for our audience, because you feel so passionately about Section 32 that you've spent 2 years fighting it,
and I will
with your
fight
own
it.
financial resources, significant financial resources that you've thrown into this fight right now. Can you continue to take this fight on?
One thing, Bronwyn, I've really made a commitment to this country that I will fight this piece of legislation until I have the last cent, because I think it looks like the strategy right now is to really frustrate me financially, exhaust me financially. And one thing for sure, I'm really committed. For as long as I have money in my bank, I'll fight it until I have the last cent in place. But it's really quite unfortunate when you can have the government that does not really respect the rule of law. Because when you have the civil society being against aspects of our constitution, the government has got to really be an exemplary in ensuring that I think we respect the spirit of our constitution.
Herman, you have come from a position of building your own business, a very successful business. You took on the position of the chairman of the Free Market Foundation. And then you got everybody very excited because you resigned that position to announce that you were joining the Democratic Alliance, the DA, and that you were a card-carrying member of the DA.
I think it's a really high time for us as South Africans, particularly the privileged South Africans, for our political views to really be known. I'm a free citizen of this country. The Constitution protects me and gives me the right to really decide who I vote for. I vote for political parties that resonate with their value system and their policies.
You're not really answering my question.
Well,
where, sir, is your political career going?
my political career, I'm an active member of society, for the first time in my life taking such a difficult decision to actually belong to a political party. It's something I never done in the past. But at this point in time, I thought it is really appropriate for us, for me in particular, to really help take this democracy to the next level. And that's exactly what I did.
Do you see yourself taking a more significant position within the DA?
Right now, I have full confidence in the leadership of the Democratic Alliance. There's a reason why I've decided to announce my support for them. And for as long as they continue doing what they're doing, creating a platform for some of us to associate with them, I think I'm happy to really play the role from outside. Obviously, if the country collapses to a stage where some of us need to stand up, absolutely one would really do this, but not to that level where I would really personally, someone with such I've got no knowledge of politics to really be a politician. Obviously, I know about politics because politics is something that affects all of us as citizens, and I think we need to really take special interest in the matter. But I don't think I'm clever enough or experienced enough to really be direct in the political field. I don't really know that field as a politician.
And do you believe that the country is collapsing? If you look at the state of infrastructure in South Africa, Eskom has to come to mind. You must have had many conversations about Eskom and where we are on that front.
No one can really doubt the fact that I think we are really facing a serious challenge. But that is why it's important for us to really help opposition parties like the DA to really create the discussion and really make sure that I think we're not really taken for granted. Because the only way this democracy will survive is that's when you have strong opposition.
And that's all we have time for this week. Thanks so much for joining us on Captain's Rewind. Until next time, from me and the team, it's goodbye.